Now, I don't know about you, but TV over the Christmas break really didn't seem to be what it once was, like in the days when I used to highlight dozens of shows in the Radio Times and set the video recorder. There was a decent bit of excitement in EastEnders, wasn't there? And the Barry Humphries documentary I thought was excellent. But for me, there was really just one drama which stood out, and it was a show which could well do something quite rare, and that's bring about actual change. It was ITV's Misdebates versus the Post Office. Jonathan Samuels here with the Sky News Daily. And Mr. Bates is Alan Bates, one of the sub-postmasters who campaigned tirelessly after what became known as the Horizon scandal. Now, that saw more than 700 post office branch managers convicted of false accounting, of theft, fraud as well, all because of the faulty Horizon computer software. Now, thousands of people were wrongly accused. Some went to prison. Many paid out thousands of pounds to cover non-existent shortfalls. It's been going on for years now, but this drama has given it new prominence, and it's brought the story to the attention of millions of people who perhaps previously had missed it. Well, we've got three people who were portrayed in that drama. We'll come on to Lord Arbuthnot, who was then a Tory MP who took up the case of one of his constituents. But to start, the journalist who first broke the story, Rebecca Thompson, who worked at Computer Weekly at the time, and also Lee Castleton, played by Will Mellor in the drama. He ran a post office in Bridlington.
The Christmas of 2003, we started to have a few little glitches, and the first one cost me £1,103.18, which it was kind of unexplainable. I didn't really get my head around it. I couldn't understand how we'd had this loss. And then for the following weeks, the 12 weeks in total, we were sometimes up, sometimes down, and I think we balanced once through the 12-week period. But by the end of it, we were £25,000 in deficit. Throughout the whole period, I'd rang the helpline at the post office begging for help because I couldn't understand what was going on. I'd rang sort of 91 times over the 12 weeks. About halfway through, I decided that there was not going to be really anybody there that was going to help me. And I asked for an audit, which found exactly the same as what I'd been reporting, which was a loss of 25,000. And post office just went down the tack of wanting their money. They kept telling me that it was under the contract, in terms of the contract, I owed this money. I reported to them that the money was missing and therefore I was liable for it. And the whole thing ended up in a legal argument that sapped me of all my money. And I ended up representing myself in the High Court in London and losing. And when I lost, the judge awarded them costs of £321,000, which effectively made me bankrupt. So I applied for bankruptcy, and 20 years on, this is where we are.
And Rebecca, you were the first journalist really to get to grips with what was going on. When did you realise you first had a big story on your hands?
So Lee wrote to Computer Weekly, I think it was in 2008. I also spoke to Alan Bates, who had also written separately to Computer Weekly, and obviously their stories, while not the same, obviously had similarities. So I think it was after speaking to both of them that I thought there was something in it. We found Jo Hamilton because I think the Daily Mail had covered her court case, and we got in contact with Jo. We found Noel in Anglesey, Noel Thomas. So we kind of went from there. It was quite piecemeal. It was very slow. I was trying to look back through my emails, and all I could find was apologies to Lee for how long it was all taking.
It sounds to me like you're a dogged journalist. And I was talking to Lee a little bit earlier. He said that you're one of his life heroes, Rebecca.
Well, vice versa, yeah. It's very much reciprocated, yeah. I think all of the postmasters, they're just extraordinary people. And what they've achieved is extraordinary, and they've just shown such resilience.
How do you both feel that the drama portrayed you and portrayed the history of what's gone on?
It's one of those things where, I mean, for me, it's on the personal side. It must have been so difficult for Gwyn, the writer, to weave all these people's stories over many, many years, as I say, 20 years for me. And some people even longer, and to weave all that together in some kind of format that people actually want to engage with, it's, mind-boggling, really. And to still have a human story underpinning that all the way through is quite fantastic. And the actors and the cast just portray it in such a way that you almost feel as though it's your village postmaster or your local shop owner that's going through these toils and troubles, and that empathy, that feeling of being almost part of it has obviously resonated, and just grateful for that. And as Rebecca will tell you, I get very emotional about telling the impacts and things about, for me personally, and for other friends, what will be lifelong friends for me out of the group, that are people that mean an awful lot to me and that have been treated really, really terribly.
Rebecca, are you surprised it's taken a TV drama to get things moving a little faster?
I'm actually not that surprised, because I think it took that drama, that sort of storytelling focus, to get that human story across, and it's the human story which is the thing that grabs people. It's not broken IT, it's not long legal judgments, as important as the legal side has been. What actually does surprise me is just how big a response has been and just how effective it's been, because I think once people grasp that sort of core injustice, it really grabs people, this story. But it is difficult to get people to grasp that, because they hear accounting software and people glaze over. They think they're not going to understand it, and there are aspects of the story which are hard to understand. So I'm not surprised. I'm really grateful that it's happened, so that the postmasters get this level of recognition and level of support behind them.
Yeah, the human emotions of it all come across, don't they? When were you at your lowest point, do you think, Lee? Did it affect your relationships? Did it affect your mental health? And how did you pick yourself up?
I'm a very different person now to where I was probably in 2004. I found it, a struggle. I think the biggest struggle for me is the effects it had on my wife and children and my very close family. It's very difficult to watch a family just fall to pieces. It's just very hard.
Rebecca, where do you think things are going to go next? Are you hopeful that the end may be in sight?
Obviously the inquiry is ongoing this year. Hopefully it will finish in 2024, but TBC. That obviously the Met Police investigation seems to be moving in response to all this attention. I think the biggest thing is compensation. There's been so many delays, so many issues, 4 different schemes, some issues with how they've been designed, some really great people involved and people who do care, but the delays have just been too long. And I think the main focus now is paying people the money that they're owed and paying it as quickly as possible. I've had conversations with postmasters in the relatively recent past where they can't heat their homes, they can't really afford food. People are still working really hard, and they deserve to essentially live their lives free from financial stress. This is just what the focus needs to be, that they just need to be paid this compensation as soon as possible. The bureaucracy needs to be overcome somehow. I don't know what the answer is, but they need to find answers and pay people.
Lee, where are you on the situation of compensation? You've been given some, but it's nowhere near fully reimbursed you.
Gosh, no. I received £30,000 from the original GLO settlement, and I've had an interim payment since then, just to tide me over until we can sit down properly and work out compensation. So, it's definitely a very difficult journey, and the comparisons in costs. Rishi Sunak was talking yesterday about 150 or 150 million pounds worth of compensation being paid, and that's fantastic. But there's such a long journey from that. I think only 11 people from that group of 555 have been paid compensation fully and fairly, and the legal fees now currently. The Post Office haven't been given this large tranche of money to help people and pay compensation to people, have paid hundreds of millions of pounds in legal fees, almost trying to drive down the compensation payments. And it seems, almost a contradiction in the way that things are working. So when you look at the way that the government and post office are saying that they want to fully and fairly compensate people, it's still very combative and very difficult and almost warlike between the two parties. And it makes you very angry. And having been traumatized through the whole process of being dealt so badly, I find it very difficult personally to then have to sit down with my tormentors for them to decide how much and when I'm going to get any compensation. I find that really difficult, and I don't think it needs to be that way.
It's been so frustrating even just to listen to it. One line that has come up every so often during the inquiry from the post office or the government's lawyers is mentioning taxpayers' money as though they're being careful about paying out taxpayers' money, which they were not careful with when it comes to paying the lawyers. They were not careful with when it comes to funding the lawyers, through that high court case where they continued to, until they were forced to stop lying, they continued to lie. So it is extremely frustrating, and that line in particular gets me because I'm pretty sure that every taxpayer, certainly that I've spoken to, would be very happy for their money to go to postmasters and not lawyers. So they need to find a way of getting this sorted and getting them paid comfortably.
And Rebecca, what's the end point for you? When are you going to be able to close your notebook on this story, do you think?
Oh, God knows. I mean, it just continues to rumble on, because if there are any prosecutions, obviously that will take a long time as well. I guess once the inquiry closes, I think that will be quite a huge tipping point. I hope it's sooner rather than later, because like I said before, the former postmasters involved deserve to never have to think about it again, and to try and just enjoy themselves away from thinking about this whole thing. But it's really hard to know, because the inquiry has been beset by sort of various issues around disclosure, around not being able to call key witnesses due to disclosure issues. There's been all sorts of trickiness. I mean, hopefully, like I say, the inquiry will end this year. It might go into next year. Difficult to tell at this point, but I don't think it's going to be a particularly quick wrap up. I think it will play on for a little while yet.
Yeah, Lee, it's been going on for so long, hasn't it? And you've experienced some real lows. Are you hopeful that finally you will get justice?
I don't even really know what justice would look like. I'm hoping that maybe my version of justice would be a bit, a little bit stronger than probably I thought we would get, if you know what I mean. So for people to be held to account, for people to actually be forced to answer questions directly and honestly would be interesting to hear those reasons why. And most of the time, up until now, I'm pretty much always the executive of the company, post office, and the government have been quite quiet in being straightforward and honest about facts. So it'd be interesting to see what the paperwork and the underpinning paperwork and emails and things say, and hopefully some answers will come from that, and hopefully some closure as well.
In a minute, former Tory MP Lord Arbuthnot on Fujitsu, the company that was behind the Horizon software, which still runs hundreds of government contracts. Lovely to have you with us, Lord Arbuthnot. Thank you very much for your time. And of course, you've helped the campaigners for many years. Why do you think it's taken a TV drama to really make people aware of the injustice felt by so many?
Well, for myself, I don't really mind what it takes, so long as people become aware of it. It's shocking that the legal system failed the sub-postmasters quite as badly as it did, and so did the political system. The media, we found it very, very difficult to get the media interested in a complicated story where people had pleaded guilty. And so it was Mr. Justice Fraser's absolutely stonking judgment that set things going, then the overturning of so many convictions, and finally this ITV drama, which was very, very good. And at last, a story that should have been in the public's imagination from the beginning is now there. And I think we're going to be able to achieve things that without this drama, we might not have been able to have achieved.
So who do you blame for it not being taken more seriously sooner?
There are so many people to blame. There has been a lot of concentration over the last few days on Paula Venables, chief executive of the post office, who got a CBE for her services to the post office. I personally feel uncomfortable about concentrating so much on her. There's also been a lot of concentration on Ed Davey, who was a post office minister at part of the story. He was actually carrying on the policy that had previously been carried on by Labour ministers, namely an arm's length relationship between the post office and the government, which I don't think is a relationship which works, but I think it's a bit tough to put quite so much blame on Ed Davey. Certainly, ministers should have been more prepared to push back and to ask questions, given the scale of the allegations that were being raised against the post office. But I blame virtually everybody. The legal system was to blame. The media failed to carry it. The political system completely failed. I didn't achieve anything. It was Alan Bates taking this matter to court and managing to get 555 sub-postmasters together, none of them with any money. It was an astonishing achievement.
You mentioned Paula Venables there. The Prime Minister has said today that he'd strongly support the Honours Committee reviewing whether she should lose her CBE. Have you got a particular view on that?
I am uncomfortable. We mustn't make this all about one person. It's about a lot of people, and we won't achieve justice by just going after her.
People listening to this and following this over the last few days will be pretty amazed to hear the numbers. 700 people convicted, but only 93 of those convictions have been overturned. Why is that?
Yes, I think there are more than 700, maybe up to 900, maybe even more than that. And it's astonishing itself that we don't know precisely how many were convicted. So why have so few people come forward? What these people have gone through means that they do not trust anybody in authority. And they shouldn't, because authority has treated them so very, very badly. It's almost like PTSD, and some of them may have exactly that. Those who were sent to prison almost certainly do. But then they not only have to come forward to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, they have to prove to the Criminal Cases Review Commission that their conviction was unsafe. And they may have no papers, because the post office probably locked them out of their post office the moment they were suspended from their duties and kept all the evidence. And the post office, in many cases, destroyed the evidence. Sometimes the sub-postmasters themselves, wanting to put this matter firmly behind them, will themselves have destroyed the evidence. And then they have to go in front of the Court of Appeal, which might reject their assertions that their conviction was unsafe. So the whole thing is a palaver that you cannot expect anyone who's been so shamed and badly treated and impoverished and bankrupted. You shouldn't expect them to go through that.
So given that, what's the solution, do you think?
It's not easy, but there is a suggestion that we are faced with a mass problem here. Previously, the largest number of convictions that the Criminal Cases Review Commission had to deal with on one case was 10. We are now facing something like 90 times larger than that. So this is a completely different order of things. But it means that there might be some justification for going out of the normal run of events and saying that it has to be a government bill to overturn these convictions. I would welcome that, yeah.
What about the role of Fujitsu in all of this and government contracts? What lessons do we need to learn there, do you think? Because, of course, Fujitsu have other government contracts, don't they?
They do. That is something I asked about in the House of Lords several months ago when Fujitsu was awarded the emergency alarm contract. And I was told that these things go through a normal process. Well, I think it will be harder for Fujitsu now to win new contracts, given its behavior in the post office case. What Fujitsu did was they interfered in sub-postmasters' accounts without telling the sub-postmasters, without keeping a record of what they were doing, and while denying to the post office and to the government that they could do that. That sort of behavior, given that people were going to prison, as Fujitsu must have known, in relation to altered accounts, is beyond shocking. And I think it may, well, affect any contracts that they may apply for in the future.
You've been involved in all of this for a long time. Do you believe now that the end perhaps is in sight, that there will be justice for those who've been so badly done by?
I think that the end is in sight, but it's taking so long. Justice will be done, but too many sub-postmasters will have died before it is. And we need to speed things up. We need to turbocharge this process. And I believe that the government will want to do that.
How do you feel you were portrayed in the drama? Were you happy?
Well, I wondered whether I should stand out for George Clooney, but I think Alex Jennings did a fantastic job. My family says that he got my mannerisms down absolutely. I find that difficult to understand myself, but I thought that the whole thing was magnificent. It was really well done. It was very difficult to watch, but impossible not to watch.
Nadeem Zahawi played himself. You weren't tempted?
I wasn't offered. I suppose I was thought not to be sufficiently theatrical. I don't know.
It is worth saying that the Post Office has always said it fully supports the public inquiry to get to the truth of what went wrong and establish accountability. And Fujitsu has apologised to those involved, but says it won't comment more until the inquiry is done. And that's it from this Sky News Daily. If you enjoyed it, there is another Sky News podcast which sets you up with the big political stories of the week, what's happening in Westminster and why it matters. That's with Sky News' Sam Coates and Politico's Jack Blanchard. Just search for politics at Jack and Sam's.